Welcome back to the Big Ugly Tuono project. It's been a busy couple of weeks, but I'm finally back on the spanners. I've ridden the Tuono a couple of times now, and the one thing that I'm slightly irritated by is this incredibly long lever action on the gear linkage. Because to change gear, you sort of have to waft your foot around in mid-air for ages, and it's not particularly positive. So what I'm actually going to do down here is I'm going to drill another hole in the selector a little bit further up and move the pivot point, so that to move the lever the same amount, I have to move the gear lever less. So what I've done down here is I've drilled and tapped one hole here and then the other hole that we're using, so I have some adjustment on it, and I've put it onto the highest hole up, so we have in effect nearly halved the amount of leverage required to turn the shaft. So that is a lot more positive. Now when I ride it, it might be too stiff and a bit uncomfortable on the old toes, so if that's the case I shall move down to the middle hole. Now these rear sets do have an extra hole up here, so I could have adjusted it at this end, but then the shift rod would have been sat at quite a big angle, and that's obviously not ideal because at this end, if it was pointing down, it's just not a very good lever. What you want is your levers really as close to 90 degrees as possible, because it gives a cleaner engagement. I've also spaced this out because the rod now runs straight, whereas beforehand it ran at an angle, and again then every time you pushed on the lever it was trying to twist the arm out of position. So now the action should be considerably better. Before I go out and ride around, I'm also doing a fairly crude sag measurement. So I've got my cable tie there, shove that up there. I've then been sat on the bike, and that pushes the cable tie down. And then I've got off the bike, and because the side stand position on this is pretty good, I can actually lift most of the weight of the bike off the fork and get my sag measurement. And at the moment, we're in the late 20mm, about 27mm of sag, which isn't really enough for road going on one of these. So I'm going to take some preload off it, give it more sag, and that should help the balance of the bike a little bit. So adjusting the sags, the preload even, is pretty easy on this. All I do is the big nut on here I just wind anti-clockwise to take some load off the spring. So I've made an adjustment up here. We were at 5 rings showing, we're now 7 rings showing, which is almost all the preload off. And what we have down here, I've redone the measurement, and we have 34mm like this, and then when I checked the stiction we had about 4mm difference, so we've actually got a sag of 32mm, which is still not really as much as I'd like on one of these, but I'll probably go and ride it, see if it's really made a difference. If I think I need to go some more, I shall order some different fork springs for it. Again, I've also done a very rudimentary sag measurement on the rear between the swinging arm pivot point, the spindle even, and up onto the seat unit. Now, because I'm on my own doing this, it's particularly awkward, so it's not terribly accurate, but I've got a reasonable idea. We're around 30mm of sag, so that means that the preload adjuster on the shock is pretty much where I'd expect it to be, and having ridden it, it feels about right. If anything, just a tiny bit on the soft side, but I might be able to compensate that with a bit of damping. So, what I'm going to do now is go and have a little ride around, see how it feels. I've stopped mid-ride at a local town square to make some adjustments. On the forks, the preload feels a little bit better, feels a little bit less hard, so that's a bonus, but the forks still feel quite harsh over bumps and bits. So what I've done is I've adjusted the compression damping at the bottom. It was 1 turn out from fully in, it's now 2 turns out from fully in, but there isn't much more adjustment on it. It's a little bit basic, but they are the sort of the base model forks. And on the shock, what I was finding was through a quicker corner, especially on throttle, the rear's packing down quite a bit. So what I've done is I've put some more compression damping in. I've gone from 6 clicks out to 2 clicks out, which is a reasonable change. Does feel better at a standstill, and I would probably actually take some rebound damping out of it, but the rebound adjuster is up there, and with the exhaust hot it's a bit of a pain to get to, so I shall ride it with the compression damping changes and see what it's like. But I'm enjoying it, it's good fun still. Sit rep. Just back from another ride on the big ugly Tuono, and I changed the gear linkage position before I went out, and the gear change is now much more positive. Really, the actual shift mechanism inside the engine's not massively positive, so I think we've got it as good as I can get it for now, so that's good news. And then I've been playing around with suspension while I've been out. I softened the compression damping in the forks halfway through the ride, and that has helped the bike turn better, and it's better over the bumps and bits, so that's a definite improvement. I also put some compression damping in the rear, which has helped, but it's really masked the fact that the rear of the bike is really a little bit too soft. So I might look on the shelf and see if I have a slightly harder spring. Don't want to go crazy with it, I just want to give it a little bit more poise. Also did quite a few heavy braking manoeuvres while I was riding, and the forks are nowhere near bottoming out, so I'm almost inclined to go a little bit softer on the springs in the forks. So at the moment the situation is we've got almost no preload in the front forks, they're still fairly firm, and we've got a load of travel left, so we can go softer on those. And the rear, especially on corner exit on quicker stuff, is wallowing a little bit. I can afford to play around with the rebound a little, but while you're out riding the bike it's a nightmare because you can't get to it. So there's a little bit of fiddling to do yet. There are a few things I'm going to try, but I might end up playing around with spring rates. The advantage to playing around with suspension is it's an excuse to just go and ride your motorbike. Excellent. I decided to get a second opinion on the Tuono before I started fiddling too much more, so I got Adam to come along for a ride, and to pull a really crap wheelie. So then Adam, your first experience of big litre bike, and first experience of proper big V-twin and lots of torque, what do you think?
My testicles still hurt a bit after the front came up a little bit more than I thought it would, and it's the first time it ever came up. The bike, that is, not that, which I don't think it's going to anymore after the fall back down onto the tank, but oh, she's a heavy beast when you first get on, and as soon as you get going, all that goes away. It's really, really light on the corners. Really nice and nimble around the corners, which I wasn't expecting, and it's really comfortable. I've not had bar heights this high before. Hurts a bit more on the elbows, not on the wrist, which is odd, but still. But it pulls like a goddamn train. First gear, second gear, third gear. You might be lucky around the little B roads to get into 4/4/5 because it just grunts that much. I like it. Big litre bike, V-twin, beautiful.
Thanks for watching, and join me again next time when I'll be doing more suspension fettling.